Welcome to the third and final video of this front axle build. The axle is built in the differential part. I'm going to hook this back up to the truck while I'm waiting for this lower ball joint on the driver's side. And once that comes in, I'll put the axle shafts and I'll fit and finish everything, put the knuckles and the spindles and the brakes and the wheels and everything together. We can adjust the steering bar and all of that. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Enjoy the video. Okay, so my Amazon package is a little late because sometimes it's hard to find my house, and that's fine. So I went to Napa and bought a ball joint so that I could finish this project. For about 50 bucks at Napa, I got this. I was kind of surprised when I opened this up. It's actually got what looks to be a tool to install this thing, which is kind of neat that they included that, because you put that over there and then you could use a press to press it in. Let's give it a try. Looks good. So that worked pretty well, and it's the right color. Matches the Jeep pretty good. Not that that matters. And once you get your lower ball joint pressed in, you want to take your snap ring pliers, and shoot it across the shop. Then, after you search for your snap ring for like a week and then finally find it, then you can go ahead and try to install it in midair so that the camera can see. Make sure that it's in the groove all the way around. If you got the world's smallest grease fitting, so you could grease this up when you're done, screw that into the bottom. There's a non-greasable option where you could just put a plug in the bottom, and some ball joints are sold with a grease fitting and a grease plug. I would prefer to grease my ball joints. It's greasing the top because it's a bushing anyway, and greasing the bottom just because it's there. There really isn't a chance to knock this off. Well, that's not true, but you're not really likely, because this is going to sit pretty much inside the tire, or inside the wheel. So there's a little lip on the top of this nut, if you can see that, and I'll bring it in close so that you can see. It's actually got like a little swedge on the edge right here, and that's so that it pushes this ring in, and that's actually what locks this nut in. Now all we got to do is put this knuckle on. We can start doing cleaning out our tubes, put on our axle shafts, and putting together our hubs and our spindles and our brakes. All right. That's pretty easy. We put our nut on there. Turn that way. Okay, then we're torquing this to 70 foot-pounds as described by the instructions for the ball joint eliminator. Looks like it's just spinning that ball joint. There's a groove in here, and I'm not sure if there's a special tool to hold the ball joint, but I've just been using a screwdriver, and that seems to work okay. We're able to turn the nut without spinning the ball joint now. Just had to get just a little bit, just a little nudge. Snug that up just enough so I get the torque wrench on there. Torque it to 70 foot-pounds. Turns. It's got a little bit of resistance, which is just what you want. It means that the upper and lower ball joint is just snug enough so that they'll do their job. I like it. Now I kind of want to set up some lighting so it's a little easier to see this. There's a couple things I want to talk about. For one, I've heard that you want to grease up these splines so that you don't run the risk of tearing your seals in your axle. The other thing is, if an ogle will support this so that it's not resting on the bottom of the tube, I want to bend this drive shaft all the way down so I can actually use this end of it to support, and that way I can hold it here because that's the only place I'm going to be able to hold it, and then push down on this as leverage to kind of keep the other end up out of all the possible dirt that's in the tube, and to help lift over and through that inner axle seal. I've just got some STP all-purpose grease that I've had for a little while. Just gonna take a finger scoop like Nutella and coat these just like that, and then wipe the excess on my pants. Just kidding, I've got a rag. Okay, now we can go ahead and start feeding this into the tube. And I'm just doing a fit check here, just like that. It's through and splined in. Now, what I'm looking for is if this toilet plunger seal, bell seal, I don't know what RCV is calling it because I'd have to look it up. But to me, this axle shaft looks just like a toilet plunger. Anyways, you want to make sure the plunger head isn't contacting the nut for the lower ball joint or the shaft of the lower ball joint itself. And if it does, we just have to take our flat wheel and grind down the lower ball joint so that there's a little bit of clearance. Well, okay, you can see that it is just barely touching. And so if I don't correct this now, it'll probably wear a nice little stripe in that boot, and then the boot will have a stress point where it can break, and then you'll have two pieces and it won't seal as well, because this raised lip on the end right here is actually where this boot looks like it has a lot of strength. So I definitely want to maintain that. So I'll pull this axle shaft out and we'll sand down the end of that ball joint really quick, and then we'll put the axle back in and see how it fits. And then there's a washer that we need to weld to the bottom of this pin, and that's actually what holds the knuckle on if your lower ball joint breaks. You'll still be able to get back to your trailer or your tools instead of having to do some crazy field repair. It's also a good idea to make sure that when this turns, the knuckle isn't gonna touch your sealant as well. And that's your max turn right there. It looks like I'm just missing it. Oh, I got plenty of room that way. So yeah, we're good. We just need to sand a couple threads off and weld our washer, and we're good. Here's that washer that they want welded right here, and there's a little bump out right here on the ball joint eliminators that locates where you're supposed to do this. Certainly clears everything we need it to. This is the exciting part, because now we can go ahead and check our seals on our spindles, start putting this thing back together. Now it's kind of dark on this side, so it's a little difficult to see everything. I have a lot more light on the other side, and since I don't want to film this twice, I'll go ahead and finish this one up, and then when I do the other side, I'll actually know what I'm doing because I've done it once. So give me a few minutes. Alright, so much better lighting on this side and a much more beautifuler knuckle. So I've already shaved down the lower ball joint nut and stud. I tack welded it just so that I don't lose torque, and then I welded that washer on the underside of this ball joint eliminator. Now we're ready to grease up the end of the axle shaft and slide that in. That slides right in because we have enough clearance between the nut and the cup, or the plunger. I like calling it a good plunger. Okay, now we're ready for the spindle to go on, and the spindle has a brake caliper plate as well. Now there's a roller bearing that goes on this nice polished part of the axle shaft, and so I'm just going to do a finger scoop of strawberry jelly on there, so that's nice and greased. I've already cleaned and inspected the bearing in the spindle itself, and that's greased as well. If the bearing looks pretty bad or sounds pretty bad, I would recommend replacing it. We'll go ahead and put that on there. At this point, it's a good idea to make sure that everything's seated correctly on both sides. It looks like it has. Alright, next order of business. There's a seal that runs right on this fatter lip right here, and so I want to clean it off of all the dirt and dust that settled on this while I've been working on the axle. I already cleaned all the grease, all the old grease off this spindle, but I'm going to go ahead and wipe it down really good anyway, because there's some bearings that's going to ride on here and I want to have some fresh grease on it. So that lip that we were talking about right here is a seal. This is the seal that rides on there, and if you don't already have a new seal, you can buy these. Just go ask for spindle seals for that year, make, and model, or you can order a kit online, I believe. I'll try to find a kit to rebuild the spindle and hub on an old Ford axle, and I'll link that in this description below. Now that that's nice and clean, I'm going to go ahead and put a nice coat of grease, strawberry flavored grease, all-purpose grease, on the where the seal goes and where these bearings go. Even though the bearings don't spin around the shaft, I'm just still going to put some grease on it just because I want everything to install nice and smooth. I'm also going to put some grease on these threads here. Now, I'm not the authority on any of this because this is the first time I've ever done an old school Dana 44 axle. Online, people are saying that you torque your spindle nuts to your inner spindle nut to 30 foot-pounds, then back it off and tighten it by hand. So that's what I'm doing. But there are lots of people online who know way more than I do about this. So I'm going to go ahead and trust what they're saying. And conclusively, I've read about 5 or 6 different people that say to torque it to 30, back it off, and then tighten it by hand. So now we can go ahead and put this on. There's a bearing in this already. Make sure that seal just kind of slides on there. Spin the spinner a little bit. Now I'm ready for the other bearing. Now it's a good idea to keep all of your parts in a Ziploc bag or an otherwise contamination controlled environment. I forgot to do that, and so I'm wiping all the grease off of here. That way I know that any dust that has stuck to the grease is being wiped off, and then I'll just roll this in some it's already packed. I'll just roll it in some of the all-purpose grease that I have. To put some grease on this sucker, just like that. And then that goes around the axle shaft and all the way back to the race of this. That'll hold that up while you get your other parts in there. What I'm going to try to do here is the closest video you've ever seen of someone assembling the nuts for the hub and the worn locking hub itself. So let's give it a shot. Okay, so this is the best lighting I can do. I've got this icon little light flashlight thing shining in there the best I can. Before I go wipe any grease in here, I can tell that there's a little bit of gunk in there from before, so I'll wipe that out. Might have been a little bit of rust from before, so I'll go ahead and wipe that out. That's that orange look you got in there. Now that bearing is not all the way back, and so you can get this little bit of wobble. And those are tapered bearings, which means you've got them two bearings that are tapered that are facing each other opposite ways. And that means that if you push this bearing back, that's what kind of holds this whole hub assembly the correct way. Working with a shotgun microphone that I bought for 20 bucks. That was recommended to me by Mark from FM Jeeping. I'm probably really close to the microphone, so I hope it doesn't distort the audio. I'll try to talk a little quieter. So this ring here is just a ring that holds the spring, which holds your lockout assembly to the outside of the hub. I'm just going to clean it off right here, and I'll throw this in there just so that I can forget about it. It does not interfere with the lock nuts, so we're good to just throw this in there just like that. And that's just a backing plate to hold this spring so that your spring is not riding on the bearing itself. It rides on that little washer. You've got these two lock nuts that hold everything together. There's one that's completely smooth, and there's one that has a little nub right here, if you can see that. You want to put this one in first. This one actually gets locked with one of the holes on this washer, and then this little tab right here goes into a slot, a keyed slot on the inner spindle itself. So that's kind of what holds this nut from moving all together. So we're going to go ahead and set this here, and you could either try to thread this on with your fingers like this, and if your fingers are super fat, like mine barely fits in there, you can go ahead and get your 4 tang socket. This is a 2 3/8 inch outer spindle nut. Anyways, I think I bought this on Amazon. I'll link that in the description below as well. I'm just gonna screw this lock nut down, and we're gonna apply 30 foot-pounds of torque to it. And I'll go ahead and torque that up. And that's just to seat those two taper bearings. I'm gonna spin this. You see it loosened up a little bit, probably because those bearings were probably angled like this, and then tightening it and spinning it kind of straightens them out. So because of that, it's probably a good idea to go ahead and tighten that up again. Now, although I've never done spindles on an old Dana 44 before, I have put together things on a much bigger scale working on big cat equipment, and it's pretty much a giant version of this in some cases, but the mechanics of it is all the same. So I will do that one more time. Now, the instructions on the Ford forums on the internet, they say that seats the bearing, and then you want to loosen it back up about 90 degrees and then tighten it by hand. Now, the correct way to do this would be to set up a dial indicator and check run out of this spindle to see if there's any wobble. I don't have a dial indicator. In fact, I just had to borrow one to build this axle in the last video. So once you have this inner nut locked down hand tight, then you can take this ring right here, line up this tab with the spindle, and see if it lines up with that pin. And luckily, mine does. Reading the forums, if it doesn't line up, you can tighten up that inner nut just a little bit so that it will line up. And I would imagine that a little bit tighter is better than too loose. If you tighten up these nuts too much, you'll end up either cracking the race or having some other damage with the bearings due to premature wear, etc. So then you take your lock nut, and they look exactly the same on both sides, so I don't think it matters which end goes in first. I'm going to thread that in and go ahead and torque that to 45 foot-pounds, and that's just my guess. I didn't get that far into the forums to read how much torque people are putting on this, but I could always go back in and adjust it later if I feel like my hubs are a little bit loose. If you're using a new lockout, you're going to want to retain that larger spring that you pulled out of your axle, or your hub. So this one will go in there, and this is what helps push this hub to the outside and helps to engage and mesh all the gears. As I said in the previous video, I am upgrading to these worn lockout hubs. They are part number 20990, and this is what RCV recommends to use with their axle shafts and in combination with stronger gear with the correct amount of splines as their axle has. So this is interesting. I just noticed this. This is one of the things that makes RCV so strong. So you can tell that these splines have kind of this, you could tell that the end of this axle shaft has kind of a little bit of like concave to it, or dish. It looks like someone has pushed the metal in. That's because RCV axles don't cut the splines on their axles. They roll them in, which makes it like, I don't know how much stronger, but it is significantly stronger to roll your splines in than it is to cut them. I don't know who needs to know that, but I just thought that was really cool. That's the kind of thing that fascinates me. So now that we've got all of our nuts done, it's time for a couple more finger scoops of strawberry jelly. That way we get this all greased up and ready for our brand new worn lockout. Now these lockouts originally come with a center gear that has the wrong spline count. And so when you buy these axle shafts, RCV recommends that you buy this inner ring. And I will show you how to install this center gear into this lockout right now, and then we'll come right back to what we're doing now. Okay, now that we've got the gear installed into this lockout, we can go ahead and spline this in. I mean, in theory, it should just go right in, right? So this is a great example of like some of the behind the scenes stuff that all YouTube mechanics deal with, is the problems. And usually they get edited out, and so it makes it look like our job is really, really easy. But in fact, we run into issues like this where the lockout won't go all the way in. So I'm gonna have to take a look at all the gears and see all these splines here and see maybe there's an issue with the splines. And then I don't see any issues with the brand new worn locking hub. I'm going to take my seal pick and kind of feel every single one of these splines here to make sure none are got anything bad in it, like rocks or debris. Maybe I need to clean this up a little more. Just these are all the things that I'm thinking of. Can't find anything wrong with the splines. Try to fit this again. Put the spring in there. Just doesn't seem to want to go, which is strange. This should just slide right in there. Kind of makes me wonder if try turning this a little bit. Maybe we need to retorque. Oh, nope, there it goes. That's interesting. So I can tell there's a little bit of run out in the bearings, which means that that's what's causing this lockout from sliding freely. And so what we're going to have to do, unfortunately, is pull everything back out and redo that inner locking nut. I hope that my efforts and my mistakes and the little behind the scenes action here is actually helpful, because there are times when I've watched a YouTube video where everything in the video seems to go perfectly, but when I do it, it's all messed up. So there we go. We'll get that to slide out. It's a sweet spot. Let's go ahead and we'll redo these nuts. Another hot tip for you, if you're going to be doing this, don't put a camera between you and your work, because you won't be able to see in there very well, and then you'll have issues like this. And we're back. I finally got this run out all out of there. We can put this back in. It feels way better even. So we'll put our spring. You've kind of got a lot like hold in your inner lockout parts, because that spring is going to want to push them back out of the hub. Okay, now I find it easiest to go ahead and put this ring in there next, because you can kind of hold everything in. That'll hold the lockout in there. Okay, now we've got this snap ring here, and you'll find that if you put this snap ring on, and I have to move the camera just a little bit so that I could do that. You try to put this snap ring on, and it just won't go in the groove. And that's probably because you need to grab your axle and push it out. Ring has popped into that groove. I don't know if you saw that, but it's now in that groove. Good. This is the point where you would want to grease this center grease zerk, which is a needle style grease zerk. And if you ever would like to grease your RCV axles, which I recommend doing every other run, or as often as you feel necessary, or you can go off the recommendations on the RCV website. I just forgot what they are because I've never owned RCV axles before. But once you've got all your grease in there, now you're ready for the outer hub assembly. Whenever I'm installing something that has lots of hardware like this, I like to get all the hardware threaded first before I actually push all the mating surfaces together. So I'm going to put all these little bolts in there and just kind of let this thing hang out. Doing that will actually do a couple of things for you. For one, it'll help you to break less seals. It'll help you to put parts on straight because the bolts or whatever hardware you're using will kind of act like guide pins. And then in addition to that, if you were to put some bolts in and tighten them down, then you might not have all your holes lined up. There we go, we got all those threaded in. I can push this in. There's a little seal that you'll feel pop in. And we could tighten all these up. I'm just going to go in a little star pattern and give them a little snug. All these do is hold the outer and inner hub lockout together. They don't actually hold any parts in except for those, so they don't have to be super tight. Now it's a good idea to make sure that you did everything correct. Counterclockwise is a full unlocked position. I'm going to turn this to make sure that everything is turning nice and free. And then I will take this lockout, which is a little sticky because it's new, and I'll turn it and I'll make sure that it locks. And I'm also seeing how much this will turn to turn all the way. The reason that I want to do that is because if your lockouts are quarter turn or 1 3/4 or whatever, you wouldn't want to go halfway because not all your gears inside here are going to be linking up, and you could break off all the gears and ruin a perfectly good hub. So make sure that it's turned all the way so that I know that all of my gears are splined. And now the outer hub is locked with the axle shaft. This is kind of interesting. If you hold a little pressure on your disc brake and unlock this, the engagement of your gear inside and your axle shaft will actually hold itself in place. And listen to it when I bring the shotgun mic really close, when I let go of the brake. You can actually hear the gear disengaging, which I think is pretty cool. So I need to put the tires back on this thing so that I could do the final adjustments to those ball joint eliminators. And I think aside from that and the steering stuff, the axle will be pretty much finished. I just have to plug a couple of holes where I was going to use an ARB locker and decided not to. And then I need to install the breather to the axle tube. But that's pretty much going to be different on any axle that you build. It just depends on where you want to put the breather and what type of breather you want to use. I happen to be using this type of breather off of a UTV. It's a bellows style, so it's not actually open to the environment unless this rubber part breaks. This will expand and contract as your differential oil heats up and cools down, and will keep all the dust out of your axle. And then also, if you do any water fording or river crossings and so on, it'll actually keep the water out of your axle too. I will post a link to this bellows part, and then for the fittings that I bought are just from Ace Hardware, little 1/8 inch. There's a 45 and another piece. So that'll be linked in this description below. It's an affiliate link. Click on it if you want. If you don't, that's okay. Click on it if you want. If you don't, that's perfectly fine. I'll install this later because I think I want a 90 on the end instead of a 45. So before I go any further with this axle build, I want to make sure that my high steering mount didn't raise my steering link too high. So I'm going to cycle this axle up and down before I put the springs on. That way I'll know I need to adjust this bar by bending it or something like that. That is full up travel. I'm hitting the bump stops on both sides. Oh, it looks like I'm clearing everything. Let's turn this. Oh, I clear everything. I love it. drop this down a little bit. Barely goes on there. Okay, next on my list of things to do is I bought some brake calipers for this. There's two different size old Ford brake calipers. One of them has like some pin things to push in the top and bottom. The other one just has like a pin spring clamp thing in the bottom. That's the one I bought, and I'm hoping that they fit on these brakes. I also brought these banjo fittings that will adapt from a banjo fitting on these brakes to a -3 brake line. So I'll be able to hook up some steel braided brake lines to this. So you've got the bleeder on the back and then the banjo fitting on the other side. Here's the parts that retain the brakes, and that's what I was talking about, and I'm hoping that's what this style is. I'm guessing that the way these are shaped, top and bottom on the bracket, fits into how these are carved out there. It seems like one gets pushed upward, and then you somehow have this bracket on the bottom. It gets pushed in like this somehow. Refer to an authorized original equipment service manual for detailed installation instructions.
First things first, we're going to go ahead and remove the lower retaining bolt to keep your caliper support key in place. Just remember, and then use a hammer and just smack it off until it comes completely out. The next step obviously is to get your caliper support and key, and you're going to put them back in, slide them in through the front.
I guess my parts are just really tight fitting, but they will fit, I'm pretty sure. So I'm going to go ahead and put a couple of brake pads. Okay, so one thing that I found, what is most annoying about trying to figure out how to work on old vehicles, is that no one actually shows you what that looks like up close. At least not what I could find in my hour and a half of searching. So basically you have this piece with these little cutouts, and these little cutouts here are for a bolt that goes through there. This actually slides that facing out into the brake, but you put this spring on top of it first. And I suppose if I had some old school Ford manuals, I'd be able to find that in the manual somewhere. But I don't, and I don't want to order it because the axles is the only part that I'm using off of that truck. Should I probably buy the manuals? Yes. But am I gonna? Probably not. Basically get that in there. Tap that in until you get to that bolt hole that's open on the other side. So right about there. And then you can thread in this bolt, which is pretty nice that it came with the kit. I don't have a tap set, or I'd be cleaning out this hole. Let's just see if it threads in. Okay, that bolt went in pretty nice. It has a little tapered spot right behind the head of the bolt, and so if you over tighten it, you'll probably just break this off. It's not meant to be flush with this. All these parts here, plus this little retainer, are supposed to move side to side on the brake rotor. Now later I'll be putting these banjo adapters on that hook up to 3N stainless brake line, and I'm going to set those aside because I'm working on some brake stuff in a video after this one shows. I'm doing a WJ brake booster install, and I'm doing, you know, brake handles, and I'm doing steel brake line. All right, axles put back together, wheels are put back on. I just need to put the tie rod on this thing, make sure it clears left to right still, and then we'll set it down on the ground and we'll be done with it. Some different bolts. So that concludes part 3 and the final video for this front axle build. To recap, if you didn't see the first 2 videos, we put 513 gears on a spool in the front, RCV axle shafts, brand new lockouts with upgraded RCV inner gears, brand new brake calipers and brake pads that fit on the original 1974 F100. Of course, it's got the Barnes truss on the top modified so the springs could be pushed back like 3 or 4 inches. We did really beefy inner C gussets, modified the panhard bar mount so that this steering assist ram could fit right underneath it. Gusseted that in so that it won't break off. Put the tires back on, put everything back together. The only thing that I need to do really is to add the breather to this, like I said earlier, and then cap off a hole where the original breather was on this axle. And I think fill it up with oil, connect a drive shaft to it, and it's good to go. Now, I was worried that because these lockouts were a little thicker that they would stick out too far. It ends up being about a 1/2 inch recessed behind the beadlock ring, and about 1.5 inches to 2 inches behind the side tread of the tire. So I don't think I'll ever have any issues of damaging the lockout or, you know, breaking it off. If I do, then, you know, they're lockouts. I just have 3-wheel drive for the rest of the trip. There's a lot of cool stuff that has gone into this Jeep build, including a 5.3 LS engine from a 2002 Chevy truck, which runs seemingly pretty well. Radiator in the back, onboard air, rear mounted battery. This thing is going to have so much cool stuff on it. In the next few months to come, I'm hoping to get this thing to where I can be driving it around, and I'm really close technically, because I got my Tom Woods drive shaft in and installed. I actually hit myself over the head with it the other day, and it did not feel good. But with that in, I've got gear oil, I've got transmission fluid. All I've got to do is plug in the electronics to my transmission, and I could drive this thing around my yard probably sometime next month if I have time. So stay tuned, keep watching. Yesterday we ran into a couple of guys. One of them's name is Greg. He was actually on the Unreal Adventure trip right now, and he had some trouble going up the hill toward the Morenci mine where I work, because they're going to do that route through the weave or whatever. And this was probably like 2 weeks ago. It's probably on TV already, but they actually went to the Napa in Safford, where I've been getting some of my parts, and that Napa is amazing. Like, so to get this lower ball joint, I went to O'Reilly's, and they had 2, but one of them was missing the seal that goes over the shafts between the inner C and the knuckle. So I took that back, and they were out of them. I had bought the last 2. Then I went to AutoZone. AutoZone doesn't even carry lower ball joints for the old 1970s Fords. So then I was like, okay, so in the AutoZone parking lot, I went to Amazon and I ordered a ball joint that's on its way. It'll probably get delivered here tomorrow, but then tomorrow's too late. So I might cancel that. I might just let it arrive and have it as spare. I ended up going to Napa, and I felt like it was in a completely different environment. First of all, their storeroom floor looks like a warehouse, and they're all different, but they all have that kind of feel to it. I talked to 3 different people. I had 2 guys. There was a younger guy and an older dude, and they were both researching a 2004 Jetta that I was doing brakes on last night. Ended up getting me the right parts that I needed. They had everything I needed. I bought 3 gallons of concentrated orange coolant for this thing. They had my lower ball joint. It was a really high quality. It's the one that we installed in this video. And then while I was there, the guys that I passed that were on the side of the road working on their really cool Toyota, Greg, I forgot his last name, they showed up and got a bunch of parts from Napa, and just in the nick of time too, because they were closing at 6 and they had got there right about 5 o'clock. But I got to meet them, and that guy was super cool. He was having some power issues with his rig. But one of the coolest, biggest Toyota rigs I've ever seen. Had like 42-inch Milestar Patagonias on it, rear-mounted radiator. It was set up a lot like this Jeep Comanche, except for like times 10. No bed on it. Everything was just tube, half-backed, and everything like that. It was awesome. So if you haven't watched the Unreal Adventure yet, go ahead and watch that. The Unreal Adventure is the new Ultimate Adventure, I believe. Ultimate Adventure is being phased out just like Dirt Every Day has. And so Dave Chappelle and Fred Williams, 4x have gotten together with a couple of the other guys that have been running this thing for a couple of decades, and they've decided that they're going to go ahead and keep this adventure running, because there's probably 30 to 40 friends, which they call cronies, and they all get together every year, and then they get with the magazine, and they, like 5 or 6 people get to come and wheel with these guys every year, and it used to be called the Ultimate Adventure. Now it's the Unreal Adventure. But it got me really excited, and I think that maybe next year in this truck, or 2006 or 2007, when I build my 1946 Chevy cab with big tires on it, I might just have to apply to go on an Unreal Adventure with these guys. What that would consist of is having your truck ready to go, and you're packed up, and you don't know where in the US you're going to be wheeling at. You just know kind of a rough idea of what time, so that you could take your vacation. And then they give you a call a couple days or a week before, and they say, hey, this is where we're meeting, be there, and be there for inspection and pre-qual and everything like that. You show up, and then it's an adventure. They do that, I think, because when they first started the thing, they would post all this stuff, and then you'd have a bunch of fans of the magazine. It used to be Motor Trend. Anyways, my battery died, so I'll wrap it up. So as I was saying, like, meeting those guys and seeing them having so much fun, even though they were doing a road trip repair on that one rig they had, really kind of hit me like, that is cool, man. I want to be doing that. So as soon as this is finished, I'm going to do some skid plates and stuff. I want to do some events. So I kind of want to ask, like, what events do you think I should go on? Because I live in Arizona, so I'm pretty much, for now, restricted to all West Side State stuff. But I want to go to do Unreal Adventure, and I want to do Easter Jeep Safari, and I want to do, maybe even if I build a rig that's big and sturdy enough, 24 hell and back and stuff. So if you want to see me in some of that, reach out to the guys who are involved, or vote for me, or whatever you got to do. I'm in. Let's do it. And keep building stuff, keep having fun. Thanks for watching. Have a good weekend. God bless. And don't forget that everything you see on this channel, it's 100% not perfect.